everyone, and welcome to the Nurse Leadership Dumpster Fire podcast. I'm your co-host, Cindy Merritt.
And I'm your co-host, Taresa Higbee. We are both nurse leaders, and we are here on the podcast to share our most challenging mistakes that we've encountered in our nurse leadership journey. Hopefully, sharing these mistakes with you will help you avoid those on your own journey. We welcome all aspiring, current, and seasoned nurse leaders to tune in as we hope to bring honest, tangible, and valuable lessons, tips, and tricks, regardless of where you are on your leadership journey. If you haven't joined us before, we are nurse leaders that feel passionate about the journey and success in nursing leadership roles. We have an intro podcast, so if you want to go back to that and get more detail about who we are, you're more than welcome to jump back and check that out.
Yep. We also need to note that while Taresa and I are both employees of the VA, that this podcast is not a reflection of or endorsed by the VA. This podcast endeavor is separate from our affiliation with the VA. Our stories will be adapted to protect the anonymity and the colleagues that we've interacted with, but we will do our best to convey the gist of what happened and the take-home lessons. We will, of course, also be protecting any patient identities and complying with HIPAA laws. So last week we introduced the snack of the week concept. This week we are eating chips and salsa, and we are talking about how do you keep it spicy and passionate when you're getting into a new leadership role. So we're going to talk about some things that you can do to really help build up what we started talking about last week in our 30-day, what to do in the first 30-day episode.
Yeah. So in this episode, we want to just continue that discussion about tips and tricks for supervisors, but expand beyond that 30 days. So being a new supervisor can be super challenging. So we want to just go a little bit deeper and share some of the stories that we learned, even just among each other. The guidance and tools are meant to support your foundation. And the first 30-day episode is kind of that beginning of that foundation. So if you haven't heard part 1, go check it out. This is intended to help strengthen those skills and create a sustainable leadership pathway for you.
Yeah. So we wanted to start talking about a couple of things that are just good to keep in the back of your mind, like when you're becoming a new leader. They are less action items, but more just as you're feeling things out, things that are very helpful. And I really encourage everyone to do as you're beginning your new journey as a nurse leader.
Yeah.
So one of the first things we've talked about is finding your resources. And that is a big concept. And I guess I think that for me, some of the people that have been the greatest resources were found in surprising places. You would think that, if you are a nurse manager, you would just go to another nurse manager and say, how do I do this job? But when Taresa and I started, there were not that many nurse managers that also knew what they were doing. And so I think we ended up finding people in all sorts of nooks and crannies. Do you have a particular person in your mind, Taresa, that you think was like a surprising resource for you?
Actually, some of the staff ended up being like surprising resources on just like helping point out things that we should be paying attention to that maybe we didn't think about or consider. So I found that kind of valuable. And then surprisingly, the resources that I had are usually not nurse managers. They're people in different areas or administrative assistants. Those are usually like they just know so much.
Yep, for sure.
I think ours are called health system specialists and or administrative officers. So we have a couple variations of that, but they had been huge resources.
Yeah, I would say that for sure. I definitely leaned in on some of our administrative officers. I also really leaned in on our nurse recruiter who just like had this really strange background in HR and knew how to like navigate all the programs that I needed to do to like hire and move people into different positions and all those technical things. And then another one that I actually like this role I found in two different workplaces, a pharmacist who has worked on the unit for like 20 plus years and just like has this amazing historical background of like what this unit started as and how things have developed over time. When there's a lot of turnover, we sometimes lose that historical background of those old lessons learned or, things that are like protocols that we maybe just aren't aware of because it's kind of been lost in the sauce, so to speak. But
Mhm.
I've found a pharmacist both in my first role as a new manager and in my new role as an associate chief nurse, or like a director, uh, that has been incredibly valuable to me. And I think to me, it just like was like a big wake up call of sometimes those resources are hiding in corners that you don't always think to look.
For sure.
So that's my first tip, and something that Tress and I have talked a lot about. And then the next thing we wanted to talk about is asking for help, which is huge. And I don't know about you guys, but I have met many, many managers who are afraid to ask for help, who think that they're supposed to know it all and do it all. And instead of asking, delegating things out to your team or delegating things out to another manager, or asking someone to come in and help offload your plate, we just tend to like work and work and work and work. And then we're like so stressed out and we feel like we want to die. And we're like, why do I feel so terrible and sick all the time? Because you didn't ask anyone to help you out. That's why. So,
Yeah. I think another aspect of that I just thought of was learning to recognize when to ask for help, because I think sometimes
mm,
people don't recognize it, so they're not
mhm.
wanting help, they just don't realize they should. And
Yep.
I would say that's one of my flaws. I don't even It was funny, I had a story recently where like I realized comparatively that someone else like asked for help so quickly, and my brain immediately was like, why did you even ask for help for that thing? And
Mhm.
then I realized, like, oh my gosh, that is normal. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to
Yes.
ask for help. And like
Yeah.
it was a realization for myself. So it's a funny story on like how I realized that I thought I was being almost a little judgy even. And I was
Mhm.
like, whoa, wait a minute. And so I like paused and I was like, why are you feeling that way? And I
Yeah.
realized it's because I don't always know when to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, even as staff nurses, sometimes you get overwhelmed and somebody's like, "Hey, what do you need help with?" And you're like, "I don't even know. I can't even process what's going on right now." So sometimes I think you do have to sort of sit down and lay out what's going on currently. And, it's like sort of like those critical moments that it feels like another thing you have to do, but if you do it, it actually can save you time later, is just by sort of sitting down and making yourself a checklist or a list of things that need to get done. I call it like my brain dump sometimes, and I just write down all the things that I got to get to, and then I'll look at that and say, are any of these things on this form or this list things that someone else who's not this manager could do and help me with? And do I know any people out there who have the interest or the capacity or whatnot? So
Yeah. It's a smart
um,
one.
you and I had a really interesting lesson, I think, for both of us in delegation. That was a hard word for some reason to say. Uh, when I was the manager, Teresa was the assistant, and we were just sort of starting to get into our groove. Um, One of the reasons I hired Teresa was because, or what reasons I hired you, Teresa, was because you were so good at like identifying problems that I didn't always notice, or you would say, there's a trend going on and something's about to happen. And so I knew that I was not a all-knowing being, as much as I would
Mhm.
like to think so. Um, but I knew that I had blind spots, and I thought you would be a really good person to help me fill those blind spots. And when you started, it seemed like you wanted me to sort of give you like a list of things to do. And so I would try to do that. And I'd say, can you take care of the schedule, or can you do the timekeeping or whatever? And
Mhm.
Teresa, for those of you listening out there, when we first started, we both had sort of a compressed schedule tour and we would offset each other. So there would be days that only one of us would be on the unit. Um, and then we would have certain days we would work together side by side, but then there would be days where just Teresa was there, just I was there.
Mhm.
And so on the days that, like, let's say Teresa was off on a Friday and I had gotten to the end of the week and I'm working, and we'd been together for what, 3 days. So I didn't say I gave her an assignment on Tuesday and now it's Friday and she's not there. And I'm like, oh, that task didn't get done. And instead of just like pausing and letting her come back to work and take care of it, in my head, I would be like, oh, it's not done. It needs to get done because I just had this like urgency to get things done. And so
Mhm.
I would just like complete that task, not thinking really anything of it, and just be like, oh, it wasn't done. I have time. I'll do it. And then I would have Monday off. You would come to work. And what would happen in your head?
Then I would show up and I would be like, what the heck? I was planned on doing X, Y, and Z today, and now those tasks are done, and I didn't even get the chance to do them. So
Mhm.
it was an interesting thing because it actually brought up some insecurities for me because then I felt like not valued or just not needed, or like I wasn't as fast. Because one of the things that was different about you and I is like you did know resources a little better than I did. You had been there a lot longer, so you knew more people across the whole hospital. And I'd only been in the one unit and only been there for a few years, but I'd been a nurse for a very long time. So actually longer than you. But the difference is, and I had experience from other facilities, like several other facilities. So it was like a different variation, but like, so it was take me longer to get certain tasks done, not because my ADD doesn't allow me to work sometimes or focus at all. But anyway, so it would make me be like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not helping her. I'm not adequate. She doesn't like me, I'm not doing a good job, like all of those things. So it's like it was kind of a lesson in like keeping our insecurities in check, in addition
Yeah.
to like if you do delegate a task, like give me the chance to do it so I can learn too.
Well, and I think what I learned, so then what would happen, audience, is that then Teresa would come in, she would have these feelings, and then she
Mhm.
would send me an email because she was wanting to like get out her emotions or whatever. And it would be like, you assigned me this task. I was going to get it done. You did it for me. And now I feel like this, you're trying to tell me that you don't trust me and you don't think I can get it done. And whatever those insecurities would come out. And I'd be like, I'd come in and I'd read the email and I'd be like, "What the heck? Like, I don't. Where did she come up with that? Like, because that wasn't my intention, right? Like, I didn't wasn't trying to like be like, this is me being a passive aggressive and saying you suck and you can't get it done, so I'm gonna do it for you.
Yeah.
But it was a really important lesson for me in understanding how even when we have the best intentions of doing something, sometimes that gives people the perception that you are trying to send them a different message, um, which I think for me in leadership, I have learned several of my behaviors that I think probably I'd been doing them my whole life,
Mhm.
and they were offending people the whole time, and I had no idea because nobody told me until Teresa did, which was great because then I was able to work on that and take that lesson home with me everywhere. But I think the take home, the big lesson for me in delegation was, if you delegate something, give someone the opportunity to get it done. And instead of just doing it for them, you're wondering like, are you having trouble? What I probably should have done was waited until Tuesday and then said, I noticed this didn't get done. Are you having trouble getting it done? Do you have too much on your plate? Do you need me to take something off? Do you want me to take that task back? And allow you to be the person to decide
Yeah. And
which way to go.
and the lesson for me was that what we kind of talked about was just like don't allow your insecurities to decide that's exactly what your intent was, but rather that wasn't the intent. The intent was to just be a team player, and you could get it done. It was just those things that where you allow your those things to pop up, and I think that's going to happen for a lot of people. And I think that was a little bit of that imposter syndrome for me. Like I already felt,
Yeah.
even though I've been a nurse for a long time and whatnot, it was still like when you're newer, you don't feel like you're even supposed to be in that role, or
Yeah.
that. And I knew some of the staff didn't love that I was selected because I do have a tendency to be very direct and blunt sometimes, which is a little bit harsh. But also the upside to that is people usually are like, "Oh, you're also not wrong." Because I try to do it kindly, but it's not always.
Yes. They were like, looking back, the emails are hilarious because it would be something like, you did this thing, you didn't give me a chance. I feel like you don't like me. I feel like you don't think I should be your nurse assistant manager. If you don't want me to be your assistant manager, just tell me. By the way, this has nothing to do with our friendship. I still really care about you and I love you. And that
Uh-huh.
doesn't change anything. So she would always like close it out with like, by the way, like I'm not trying to just be mean and aggressive. Like I'm trying to give you, like you would do sort of like a something where you're like, I'm trying to give you this nugget for your growth. I'm not trying to tell you this because I think you're a bad person or I'm
Yeah.
angry at you. I just want to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So,
We wanted to be a successful team together. And I
uh,
was like, if the other thing is, it was also taking those learning opportunities from me to learn how
mhm,
to
you're
close
right.
out tasks. Right. And so I was like getting so frustrated because I'm like, oh, I just want to try to finish and I want
Mhm,
to try. And I was slower. I will be really honest. Like initially, like there were certain things I was really slow at. I hadn't done that type of computer work for a long
mm,
time. The systems were archaic to me. And I
yep,
was just like feeling a little bit overwhelmed by some of that and just adjusting to that and then dealing with my own imposter syndrome a little bit. So it was just a combination. A funny one when you were telling that story though. I remember one time I did this a lot and I don't know why, but there was a chair inside of Cindy's office audience and like I would go in and sit at this chair, she'd be at her desk and I would like prop my legs up on the filing cabinet and be in the chair
mhm,
upside down. I think we have a picture, we'll have to post it
yeah,
one time.
yeah,
And I would just sit there and I'd be like, I don't feel valued today.
yeah,
I and then I would just have my emotional meltdown, and then we would be able to get back to work. But it
yep,
would sometimes, I will say, sometimes those little meltdowns
mhm.
would actually impede some of our progress. However, they were necessary to help us get to where we needed to.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like the stress that we put on each other really helped us like both grow and become polished and find out like our true core strengths so that we could be more efficient down the road. So we were like
Yes.
buffing each other up as we went.
100%. Speaking of strengths, another thing that kind of we were as delegation goes, like finding staff members that like have strong skill sets and like identifying those things you can assign to those staff members because a
Mhm.
lot of times people want their unit to be successful and they want to be engaged and help, but they don't always know how. So if you find the things they like to do and do those, that's always helpful. Or if someone's struggling in a specific area, like not doing their CHG baths because for their central lines, we had a person doing that pretty consistently, like not doing them. And
Yeah,
then
I
2
remember that. And so this was such a crazy I remember when you did this and I was like, that was so genius. So what was happening was so we were in an ICU where they have central lines. And so catheter associated infections or central line associated infections, class
bloodstream
3
infection. Mhm.
are a really big deal, and it's a metric that we get measured on. And we in the VA, you get compared to other VAs, and then other facilities. There's the community comparison, but it's essentially like how you get graded as to like how what your quality of your care is.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's kind of a big deal.
Mhm.
And we had a spike in infections. And so we were like, what's going on? So we started trying to dig into the data and say, okay, did we follow the policies and protocols we have in place? That's always the first question, because we
Mhm.
have policies and protocols in place because they're evidence based and there's research that backs up that if you do these things, you have better outcomes. And so that was the first question. And so we went through the patient population, and Teresa noticed that there was a theme that these bouts were getting missed, and it was like only one or two of the people on our team that it was happening with so it was sort of like a person specific situation.
Yeah.
And Teresa asked that staff person to basically do their own investigation of it and said, we're having we had a spike, and I would like you to go do a little bit of digging and investigation and find out what happened and see like did we follow policies.
Mhm.
And then that seemed like it was a very valuable thing. And what happened after that?
then I also, after they did that, I was like, I also want you to help identify nursing interventions specifically that can prevent infections
Mhm.
in these patient populations. And I want you to do an in-service on those specific interventions, not the things the doctors order. I want you to focus on what nurses can do on a daily basis that can help reduce these. And I had him present it to the other staff. So not only was this person particularly the obvious tied to a lot of those infections, but they also had to do the in-service and do the research. And they happened to be in school at the time too, so I think there was a little bit of like exhaustion playing and what is it, when complacency maybe even
Yeah.
that was playing into that, and not realizing how important some of those daily tasks are that are assigned to people, and it really shifted their behavior.
Well, and I think, you told me that that person even, like, had their own aha moment where they were like, "Oh my gosh, I was part of the story that led
Yeah,
us to this situation." And so I think, if you know and it was such a, like, masterful way of doing it because, you're the manager, you have within your right, you could easily just say, "Hey, person, you screwed up, and look, you didn't get these baths done, and then we had an infection, and so I'm concerned that you're part of the problem."
right.
But hearing that and, like, that can be construed like just very critical and negative, but the way that you did it allowed that person to sort of have their own self-discovery, which in my personal experience has been are way more meaningful, and they stick in my head way more stronger than when someone just tells me you did this
Right.
thing wrong and you need to fix it.
Right.
Um,
I think you take that the desire to change a little more seriously when you
yeah.
realize like, oh, that was actually me. And these nursing interventions that are evidence-based are actually real. Because I think there's a time in your nursing career where you've been a nurse for a long time and you kind of doubt some of those
Mhm,
interventions. You think they're just tasks to be tasks.
mhm.
But when they looked and did the research, they were kind of like, oops, that was
Yeah,
me.
yeah. The other thing you were talking about though with delegating to people for things that they're good at or things that um, they're interested in or passionate about. What does that look like?
Well, I would particularly what kind of came to mind was people that are really good at like solving puzzles and organizing information.
Mm,
I remember you had one gal that you ended up picking to do the schedule because she was so good at that type of stuff. Like she could just look at the schedule and she had a spreadsheet in mind, an idea of how to organize it and how to get everybody what they wanted and needed without putting that workload on us.
yeah.
And it gave frontline staff engagement in their schedules.
Well, yes, that was true. However, I did not just know that that person was going to be the good one to do it. So what I actually had done was I was spending so much time working on the schedule that I felt like I couldn't get anything else done. And it was just creating this tremendous pressure in me. And so I
Mhm.
actually sent out an email to all of the staff and I said something like, "Hey team, I am so like drowning right now and I really need someone or a couple people to that can help me. If there's somebody out there who's willing to take on doing the schedule that could take that off my plate, I would really appreciate it. So like if anybody's interested, please come to me." And
Mhm.
then that person came and said, "Actually, I love solving these kinds of puzzles. I think it's really fun and it's really fulfilling and I would love to help you with it." And so and then another person had said that they wanted to do it as well, but I think her interest was more in trying to just take on a little bit more and grow herself. Because then down the road, that second person, it ended up being too much for her, and so she backed away. But the other person who still felt really passionate about it, she kept it,
Yep.
and it was fantastic. I mean, the way that it worked after that was so seamless. And she had her own great ideas and she started recognizing scheduling and like sign up patterns and like noticing like there are certain people who aren't meeting the expectation about, you would have like off shifts that people would be expected to pick up
Mhm.
on a 24-hour, and we tried to make it fair and equitable by rotating, and she would sort of identify those patterns and helped us create a system for tracking. and really got it to where when it came back to you and I to finalize the schedule, there wasn't a lot that had to be done.
Nope.
The most of the work was already laid out, and so we just had to make a couple final changes, and be the bad guy for, if somebody to nobody's willing to move off of a shift, and we'd be like, okay, well, we're going to rock paper scissors, and then the next time, if this comes up, then you'll get a pass and somebody else will have to take the hit.
Yeah,
um
for sure.
but I
Um,
think, but like sometimes I think you just have to be like, somebody out there, are you out there? And then hopefully there is somebody out there. So I usually start with that. And then if nobody comes, then you're like, who on my team is good at this? And then
that's fair.
start trying to like solicit directly to those people.
One other thing I wanted to mention, the person that did the scheduling, it ended up being a leadership progression tool for her, and
Oh
now
yeah.
she is the current assistant manager
Yeah,
who
for
just
sure.
took the role.
I think it's a,
So it's a great leadership progression tool. I think Cindy and I did a good job of doing some leadership progression with people as well, which is kind of a little bit off topic, but it also is, you don't want to be the manager for 20 years. I don't know
Mhm,
very many people that do want to be a manager for 20 years. So you want to start developing your people below you to help teach them skills that'll translate into the role later. Another one we did is we kind of made one of the weekend charge people like a consistent charge nurse on the
mhm.
day
Oh
shift,
yeah.
and we tasked them with like keeping us in the loop with any major events that happened, and they would close out the weekend with a nice email and let us know if anything big happened or didn't happen, and would send us kudos and things like that so we could add and share with people, and that person is now the manager. So setting people up for success and developing things that work for you and your benefit but also can develop your team.
For sure. Yeah, my boss tells me now all the time that you know that you're being successful in your role if you can step away from the unit and people don't notice that you're gone. So, like, if you can get all of the people that are working around you and underneath you as your subordinates, if you level them up to the ability that they run the ship and all you really do is like your quality checks and your like your engagement and making sure that they still know that you're there and you care about them and you've got their back and you're trying to help them
Mhm.
out, um that that's sort of like a really good benchmark to say, all right, I've arrived. I've finally become the leader I needed to be, because now I can leave and go on vacation and things keep running. And then I come back and I'm not just like drowning in problems that happened while I was gone that now I have to go pick out of my
Yeah.
1,000 emails that came out from being gone for 1 week.
Agreed. It's always a little bit heinous to come back from a vacation, but also it's just part of it, and we get through it.
Yeah,
Another thing I thought we could revisit is the concept of developing a communication process. We kind of talked about how to develop a communication process with your team and your subordinates, but we didn't really get up to where it's a two-way street. Like, not only do you need to communicate to your staff, but you need to be available and open for others, but also you need to make sure that your direct leadership team around you is aware of what's going on, what you're working on, what they're working on, and close that loop. That was something that I had learned in the past, and I brought to you and I, that if I did something or I was sending an email, I would usually just CC Cindy as an FYI. She didn't have to do anything, but she just knew what was going on so
oh
that she
yeah.
could move on without having to go back to that.
I think it's
Um,
especially true when you're in a unit where you have different levels of leadership, where you have like an assistant manager, because not all units are going to have, different parts. Some units just have one manager and that's the only person, and it's a little bit easier. But when you're, especially if you're not always there at the same time on every shift, or one of you goes on vacation and the other one's covering, yeah, trying to like make sure that the other person is in the loop, because there's this little thing that sometimes happens on units, where you might have your staff starting to do what's called splitting, which is
mhm.
sort of when they try to play mom against dad, where somebody might say, hey, Cindy, can I have this Friday off that, has been on the schedule for 2 months, but I just decided I wanted to go to a concert and nobody's willing to trade me. Can I just have it off? And I'm like, no, sorry, we can't. It's too late. Like, if you can't get coverage, then I can't make that happen. And then they might go call Teresa and ask her the same exact question. And if she doesn't know that I already talked to that person and said no, she might be like, oh, yeah, it looks fine. Go ahead. And then now that's going to be pitting Teresa and I against each other. So
Yeah.
that was a good example of like CCing each other. Or I think like when you would text staff, you would start a group text between all of us. Or if, for me, like if I sent a message, uh, then I would like quickly copy paste, send it to you and say, FYI, I just talked to this person. This is what the conversation was, so that you
Yeah.
know.
Because sometimes people interpret things differently too. So just kind of
Mhm.
keeping each other on the same page. It does increase your numbers of emails, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just really helpful to just have it available. So if they do come to you, you can just be like, hold on, let me double check something before I respond. And then
Yes.
you go double check what that information was. You don't always have to read it, but just keep it somewhere.
Mhm.
I made a folder in my Outlook of something like staff communication, and then people struggling or like different things. So
Mhm.
it was valuable. The other part of that is also making sure that your executive leadership team and your other, like your service line
Yep.
managers are also aware so that you're not all recreating the wheel all the time. So that I recommend one-to-ones also with higher level leadership if you can and if they're able, at least weekly or bi-weekly, and especially like your assistant manager, your administrative officer, your educator, making sure that you're keeping everybody on the same page
Yep.
and having those one-to-ones and checking in. One of them being like, you can't be everywhere at all the time, right? So you want those boots on the ground people to tell you how is so and so in their orientation. So you want that from either the educator or pull some of your resources from the preceptors and some of the information and kind of gather and like review. Do we have anybody struggling? Do we have, and sometimes those conversations be like, oh my gosh, someone had something personal happen and they've been really struggling at work
Oh
and those
yeah,
types of things. So just making sure you're having one-to-ones with your team, your executive leadership team, and keeping everybody in communication.
for sure. Yeah, and I think like you said, to not reinvent the wheel. Like there's times that I think we identified a problem and we're like, oh, now we got to go fix this. Let's say you had a slightly like a near miss and you realized there's no SOP on your unit to support this near miss or to like describe what
Mhm.
should have happened in this scenario.
Yeah.
And it might be that another unit already has this done or already has this addressed. And so if you're not talking to those other people who have their hands in other areas of the facility, you might not know that this is already done. You don't need to redo it. You can just say, oh, that SOP already exists. Like let's say for ICU and ER, we do a lot of similar procedures. Maybe we're doing feeding
Mhm.
tubes and it's like, we don't have an up to date SOP in the ICU, but the ER does. So we can just copy and paste that and pull that over or go, oh, is this happening in other areas? Maybe we should make this policy a hospital-wide policy so that this can be used in more than two places in the facility. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're gonna miss those opportunities and those uh, things that are already that are already done if
Yeah.
you're not bringing that up to those higher levels with the executive leadership team who is
Mhm.
interacting with a lot more bigger bird's eye view than what you currently have at the frontline level.
Yeah, for sure. So the other thing I was thinking we could talk about is like we've talked about our first 30 days and like the
Mm.
things with no timeline. And then I know we were going to talk about like what do you think we should be doing at that 6 month mark, like with staff communication?
Yeah, so we talked about doing a one-to-ones with your staff when you first get into your position, which is really just sort of starting to establish those relationships and understand what to expect from each other. At the 6 month mark, I think it's a really good time to go back and revisit what you talked about at that first meeting. Like did the person you talked to, did you have them set any goals? And do we need to evaluate where they are in that goal progression? Do they need help with, are they trying to study for a certification and they don't know where they can get material for it? And we have a library and a librarian who can get us access to study material. And, so like checking in, do you need me to help you get some resources? It's a good time to look at, have they gotten their educational requirements done? Are they up to date on their ACLS and their BLS? And have they done their HIPAA protection training and all of those little things? And then you can also probably look at leave usage at that time. Are you seeing trends? Is this person calling out every Friday, surprisingly? Um, and, do we need to have a conversation about that? Or are they doing great and they have tons and tons of leave? And you're like, hey, have you thought about taking a vacation? Because maybe you should not work every single day of your life and burn out, die. It's kind of dramatic, but um, yeah, other things. So at the end of the year, you're probably going to be doing a end of year performance evaluation. And so it would be really crappy if you got to the end of the year and your staff person had been underperforming, and this is the very first time that they've ever heard about that, is at the end of the year. So
Yeah, that's definitely less than ideal to you're setting them up for failure if you don't have those conversations earlier. And
yep,
especially with your first year in management, you may not have to do this every year where you have to meet with everybody every 6 months. It is ideal if you can, but it may not always be required. But you definitely, that very first year, it's important to set that foundation and to get that going. And then with new hires, of course, you should meet a little bit more frequently, but
yep.
your
Yeah,
annual review.
so that's a good time to check in and say, this is how you're looking, at this point, this is how I would be rating you based off of these things. And it gives them a chance to kind of correct course. It's sort of like when you're in school, when you were in elementary school and you had your midterm reviews with your teacher, and they'd be like, well, you got a C right now. And if you continue doing what you're doing, you're going to continue having a C. But if
Mhm.
you pull it together and, work really hard, you could bring it up to an A. So it's, kind of similar concept for that, in giving them a chance to, I think, recognize that they're on track for mediocrity, and maybe encourage them to level it up a little bit more, or to just say, everything you're doing is great. Keep going. Really appreciate it. What else do you think are good things to talk about at the 6-month review?
Um, the one thing I remember us doing is also asking for feedback. Like, how am I
Mhm.
performing as your supervisor? Did I forget things? Did I overpromise and underdeliver? Or explain maybe why you overpromised and underdelivers. Like, bring back that, close that loop of maybe things you did talk about and why you can't accomplish them, or what has changed. Because
Mm,
some of those conversations don't need to go to all staff, but it still needs to be discussed.
yep.
And getting their feedback on what you can do to improve
Yep.
makes them feel empowered to communicate with you, and it creates a safer environment of overall feedback among each other. If you as the manager are setting that you expect it, it's kind of easier for staff to do that among each other as well.
Yeah, and like, as the supervisor, I always ask, is there anything that you need me to be doing differently, or do you need me to do more? Do you have enough support? Do you need anything else from me? Like, basically, I'm kind of checking in to say, like, hey, are we good? Is what I'm doing for you working for you, or do you need more support? Do you think that I'm overbearing and you need me to, like, back off and let you figure things out a little bit more? Um, so yeah, again, those are opportunities, which are also good times to have space. And if somebody's feeling unhappy, then that may propagate a little bit more of that conversation. And so you have maybe a chance to see if there's something that you can do to correct that course.
Yeah.
Some people are gonna just say, I just want to go to a different area. But most, like, I think there's research out there that shows that the majority of times when people leave a position, it's because they don't get along with their manager, or they have issue with the management style. And so that's a really good opportunity for you to get that feedback, to say, is there something I should be doing differently to make my staff feel happy at work, engaged, and safe? And
Yeah.
if I'm not doing that, then I need to know what those things are so that I can be a better manager myself.
Yeah.
So then we talked about, after the 6th year, then you're going to do your end of year You're kind of like closing that loop out.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things that we're going to do in our end of year, 1 year mark?
So at your annual performance review, like you said, hopefully you've talked about some of the things they could be working on or whatever. And then now you're just kind of following up and closing that loop. Like, how did you perform? What did you do well? What could you do better? Um, and then avoid giving everybody the highest rating you can, because if you
Mhm.
do, it doesn't give anybody room to grow.
Yeah.
And making
Well,
sure
and
that
it also, I think when you rate everyone like outstanding across the board, then that doesn't really show anyone that stands out either. There's
right,
like then it's like everyone's medium.
right,
Like it takes away the like the meaningfulness of the higher rating. If
it's true.
everyone can get in, if everyone gets a high rating, then like there's not a lot of incentive for a person to try harder because there's just like there's no carrot to go after. You're like, oh, I get the perfect rating every time. I do nothing. I
Yeah.
just show up.
Yep, it's true. One of the other thing is like making sure you're consistently evaluating on performance, making sure you're not letting those biases peek in your annual and about like who you like and don't like, because that's normal. You're going to have some of those. You're going to have personalities you don't like, but making sure you're staying focused on their performance and what they're actually doing. One thing that I find really tricky as a newer manager to figure out is there are just some people who their highest level performance is still mediocre. And that's a really tricky thing because you have your high performers, your go-getters, and they're gonna perform well no matter what. And then you have those middle of the road people that just show up, they do their job, they do it okay. Sometimes they forget sometimes they're like a little bit above.
Yeah.
And those are tricky because they might be performing at their best for right now.
Yep.
Um, and that's okay.
Yep. Well,
Learning
and then I
to
think like also trying to educate them that, meeting expectations or like meeting what the satisfactory is. Like I think that we in our minds, like of many of us come from perfectionist backgrounds, like
yeah,
that's like if you're not excellent, you're failing. And
yeah.
so I think, but recognizing that meeting expectations is you're doing your job, you're doing a good job, and you're doing your job, and that's fine. You don't have to be going above and beyond. There's this like pressure is our own like competitiveness with each other. But like you said,
Mhm.
sometimes we just have to take space for ourselves and say, I'm just going to do what I need to do to get through the day right now because maybe I have other stuff going on in my life that's really draining, or I'm in school and I just can't give the additional attention here. I need to be able to just go on autopilot when I come to work and do what I know how to do.
Yeah, and making sure you don't punish your staff for being that
Mhm.
version in those places, unless it's been consistently for a long period of time. But if they
Yeah.
are kind of waxing and waning, that's okay, and don't allow that to like make the decision. And maybe even point out these are areas, and this is how what I would like to see next time is maybe let me know a little bit sooner so I'm not assigning things to you that I shouldn't be or whatever, and just keeping that line of communication open. But I think those are the major points of what you should do at the 6 month and the 1 year, and then the other things without a timeline. What do you think, Cindy?
Yeah, I think I want to try to convey that these checkpoints are just a recommendation for how you can create those checkpoints and get feedback and give feedback. But like what you do in those moments is all going to come with time and you're going to get better at having those conversations and you're going to be better at fielding out like what's going on with your staff as you get to know them and
Yeah.
you become more, a better listener or whatever. So I don't stress about what you're doing in those meetings so much as just doing them. Like making sure that you are doing them and you're taking that space is really that's half the battle is just showing up and
Yeah.
taking that time to do those things.
And I
And the
think
rest will just kind of come together, I think.
yeah, and the other thing I was thinking is like we both Cindy and I have had various templates that we've utilized over the times, and I think we could attach a couple of those to this just so you
Oh
guys
yeah.
have an idea, a jumping off point of where to start. Kept it really simple when we first got started because we didn't want these to take too much time. But we have some that you can use with your direct team, some that you can use with your staff, and we'll attach a couple of those to this episode so you can check them out and see what maybe would work for you.
Put 'em in the notes.
And that's pretty much all I have. So
Yeah.
I just want everyone to know, thank you so much for joining us on the Nurse Leadership Dumpster Fire podcast, where we share our stories and even embarrassing ones where my insecurities took over. And hopefully that shows you guys lessons and we can provide some support, laughter, commiserate.
How to maybe work a little bit smarter and not harder at times, or learn how to, I think, realize that those hard lessons are sometimes the best lessons.
They are. And how to keep things a little spicy
Yes.
so that you don't get boring. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas on topics or anything that you want us to discuss, let us know. You can reach us at cindy@arianursecircle.com or Taresa at arianursecircle.com, and then our Instagram, which we are kind of updating. So
More to come on that.
Yeah, we're working on it. It'll evolve. So anyways, thanks for joining us today, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.